All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, April 18th, and this is a meeting to check in on active development tests for Backdrop CMS. For starters, we have an updates from the PMC section of the meeting, but this is, again, an update for the PMC. There's a bunch of issues there that need votes on them. One of them in particular is something I want to put an update on the roadmap and release cycle pages about Drupal 7 end of life and Backdrop 1.0 end of life, but I want to get a consensus from the PMC on the right language to use for that. So I put a recommendation in the queue for that, but I want everyone to look at that before we make a public statement to make sure that it's correct. We might need to discuss that. So that one is urgent. The other ones are not, but there are issues in there. So I will also send an email to PMC today to try and get people who aren't watching this meeting or aren't on it, but I did want to call that to your attention. Community, we have a new Backdrop Contrib member, Vasa, real name Attila. We want to say thanks for reporting the navbar module. And Greg, I know you've been working with Attila a lot and wanted to say thank you for responding to all of your feedback as well.
Yeah, he's done an amazing job. Like he added the drop downs. He's working on adding a search bar similar to the admin bar, the one that we have in admin bar, and have it working with the drop downs, and also add the notification pads when we have errors. So it's going to be more comparable to that. Some issues, some small issues have come up, and these might be core related as well. We cannot get parity with whatever functions we are using with the menu that gets produced by admin bar. So at some point I thought that maybe, and I'll file a ticket for that, maybe the admin bar should have should be using a system function that generates the menus so that other menus like other modules like navbar can use the same thing, like produce the exact same menu, because we're doing some funky stuff with admin bar.
Yeah, so admin bar doesn't just take a system menu, which is probably what you're running into, that there's like a hook admin bar link definition. And so any module that wants to add something into admin bar implements it directly against admin bar. So you can't get it out with any other system. But there probably is a way that we could expose the completed list, if there isn't already, so that something else could grab it. So rather than calling like the
menu tree thing,
right, you would say like, give me the admin menu.
Yeah, the bad thing with that is that navbar suppresses admin bar as a module when it finds it. Otherwise, it uses there's an admin bar suppress function that we have, and it uses that to sort of like not show the admin bar at the same time.
Does it not show it, or does it like disable the module?
I think that's I haven't checked what the function actually does.
Because the module is still enabled, you can still call its API hooks and stuff, and you can still get its data. But if it actually disables the module, then you wouldn't be able to, like, none of the other things would do any of the altering of the admin bar, so it wouldn't be there in the first place. Yeah. But I don't know, like if you want navbar, you probably don't want admin bar anyway.
At the same time.
Yeah, so I don't know. I definitely think look into this and figure out what the pieces are that you're missing, and there probably is a way that we could use an API to do that instead. Just to refresh my memory, navbar is the one that moves the top menu to the sidebar instead?
Yeah, okay. Either automatically, or it actually mimics. Yeah, it actually mimics exactly what happens in D8.
Okay.
So it's that, plus there's an additional module that adds the drop-down menus. They're considering to merge it in the D7 version of admin bar, but we have done that already. So it's like more like comparing it to D8 sites that my agency is building, and we're always using those. Using that brings all that experience out of the box with that single module. So great work for Attila. Like,
great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, backdropcms.org, we mentioned this in the outreach meeting too, now has a new box on the homepage with information about upgrading from Drupal 7, just some kind of big high-level points about modules, readiness, and that sort of thing. We're going to add links to that. But other than that, it's sort of done. So if you have any feedback on that, open an issue in the backtopcms.org queue. We had a couple of other things we talked about in the outreach meeting related to the website. So if you want to get an update on that, go ahead and watch that video. For this meeting, we're just going to roll into progress report on Backdrop CMS itself.
All right. So it's been 2 weeks since we last had a meeting. DrupalCon was last week, and so we didn't kind of meet quorum for for having a meeting. But there was a lot of stuff that happened over the interim 2 weeks. First of all, yesterday there was a security release. Drupal 7.66 was released, and it was a security release primarily accommodating an update to jQuery 3.4 that came out that had a minor security fix in it. So this resulted in Drupal creating new releases, but interesting, both versions, both Drupal 8 and Drupal 7 are not running a new enough version of jQuery. And so there was some work to backport the security fix while keeping the same version of jQuery available on the individual sites. So Backdrop ported the same fix. There was a little bit of an oopsie with coordination that it was a little bit of a surprise, but we managed to get out our Backdrop version within an hour or two of the Drupal 7 version being released. So it does raise the point. I'm just going to say it before Gregory does that.
That's why I muted myself.
We need to figure out a way to upgrade jQuery to a newer version. Right now, we're on the last version of jQuery 1.12, point something, 0.6 or something like that. But that version of jQuery is unsupported, and I think this has proven that it really is unsupported, because I had been expecting this problem that when there was a security fix for software that is installed on like a substantial portion of the internet, like 30% of the internet, that they would make a version of 1.x that included this security fix. But no, they're sticking to their guns and they're saying that's really unsupported. And so if you want to get security fixes, you have to upgrade to the new version of jQuery. So that was enlightening.
Well, is that the repository where it adds the patched versions or the patches of that, the backports, whatever you call them? Is that official, or is it an effort of a single person?
It seems like it's almost both. The efforts of a single person, but the fact that it was called out in the release notes as being a suitable alternative makes it kind of official.
Yeah.
What would have made this more tenable to stay on 1.x for longer would be if an individual or organization, again, kind of semi-officially started making new jQuery updates. You know, even if they had to add another semantic versioning number, like if it were 1.12.6.1 or something like that, saying that they started applying security fixes on top of it, then that would have been a much easier way for us to solve this problem. You know, we could have just updated to a new semi-supported version of jQuery rather than doing what we did, which is port from Drupal 7, which adds a second JavaScript file that fixes the one function that exists inside of jQuery.
I think at some point we'll have to just bite the bullet. I think that the only two reasons that has been holding us back is IE8 support, because that is sort of like a joke now. And then also the work that needs to be done. There's a lot of manual testing so we don't break things. And we have to decide finally if we are going to go to, like, do it gradually, jump to 3 directly, or just go step by step, like go to 2, which is still unsupported, but yet a step closer to 3. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I kind of wonder, like, if we end up with something like jQuery update like either in Contrib or even in Core, like have it be an option or something like that, where it would stay on the old version, but you could opt into the new one for a while.
Yeah. Does jQuery update for Drupal 7, I haven't used it in a while, offer any of the 2 or 3 versions? I think it stops because the D7 still has 1.4 point something. I think it only offers 1.x versions.
There is a patch in the queue for jQuery update that updates it to 3. I'm running
Right.
jQuery 3 on a couple of Drupal 7 sites.
Okay, that's helpful then. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. There isn't a Drupal 8 version yet, but they kind of need one because
unless they update the library like we do, they keep it updated. I think that it's a good goal to sort of like decide if we want to do it for 1.14. Like we're going to have plenty of time to test things, I think. Or time to call it a 2.0 then.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we have to do for prep work as well. I think we're using a lot of functions that might not even exist anymore. Like I don't think bind exists anymore.
Yeah, but there's respective alternatives and they're documented. So all we have to do is we have to just work on replacing those, I guess.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think that it's prevalent throughout both our core code base and throughout Contrib, because that was kind of the thing for a long period of time.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Anyway, yes, we do have an issue for figuring out jQuery just in general, though. Do you have the version number, issue number handy by chance?
I will. Just give me some chance in it. I think I mentioned it on Slack. The security channel. Just go find it there real quick.
By Slack, you really mean Gitter, right?
Gitter, yes. Sorry. Force of habit. Security.
Oh, also interesting. Jen, can you talk about CVEs real quickly?
Sure. So when we do a security release, we are supposed to request a specific security vulnerability identification number from, I don't know what authority is called. There's someone who issues fancy numbers. And so what we're supposed to do is request one so that anyone who's referring to a vulnerability in our software will be able to reference it by this particular number. We have a backdrop specific number in the same way that Drupal has a Drupal specific number, but this number is supposed to be specific across all software. And so what we have been doing is having Nate, after we do a security release, go and request a CVE. But yesterday he was super busy, so I asked if that was something that we could delegate to other people, and he said it was. And so I created a new markdown file in the procedures folder about how to request a CVE. So now in the future, when we do a security release, anyone is able to do so. There's a form that needs to be filled out, and a couple of the fields in there sort of always have the same answers for us. And so I put all of the questions that have predictable answers or where to find them in that document. So hopefully next time we have a security release, anyone can take on the task of requesting a CVE. Yesterday, I requested one for the first time. We'll see how it goes. I haven't gotten a CVE back from them yet, but I did get an automated response saying that they got my submission, which I guess is good. But yeah, I hope I filled out the form correctly and they're going to send it back with any complaints. But if so, I will also update the documentation so that it is clear for the next people.
Okay. So the ticket number for jQuery is 3106, but that's to upgrade to 2.x. At that point, I thought that maybe we should take gradual steps, but I do mention 3.6 there. I don't know if we want to make that a separate issue or repurpose that one, but yeah.
Yeah, I can weigh in there. I kind of think that we should try to get all the way to 3.x rather than like moving to 2.x. Just seems like we'll have 2 times that will break things rather than 1 time that will break things. And of course, break things being, that there'll be an API change, but we'll maintain compatibility. So there'll be kind of like an opt-in, I think, type situation to move on to 3.x. I think that's what we should hope for. within the version 1 of Backdrop.
Do we know if there's a lot of contrib using relying on jQuery, I should say, at the moment?
Oh yeah,
I imagine slideshows, stuff like that.
I would even probably guess most modules probably have jQuery dependency.
I don't know about dependency. I think they just assume it's there.
Well, yeah. And so it's a dependency. I mean, doesn't the we
A
don't.
data dependency. It's an
Yeah.
It's a
actual
reliance.
dependency.
It's a reliance.
Yeah.
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 Is there a way in jQuery to provide a backwards compatibility layer between versions like we do between Backdrop and Drupal? Like if we had a jQuery file
like
that included
like a shim.
bind and wrapped it, like bind wraps whatever the new alternative is, or does that not work?
Yeah, so I've done a research last August or May, and there's I've posted it there in that queue. I think there's a migrate something. Yeah, jQuery migrate module that you can use that provides backwards compatibility functions. But then they removed it at some point. I'm not sure. Anyways, I'll do some research again and see. But there was something in place.
So I feel like if we can get the backwards compatibility in, we could put that in the 1.x branch, which would make it easier on maintenance. If there's not, or we're not sure we can guarantee that it'll work, this might be something that we could push to 2. I also haven't finished writing up the issue yet, but I'm opening an issue in the PMC queue about what Backdrop 2 means, because I think we need to, every time we talk about it, we're like, we've got 3 options, and I think we should commit to one so that everybody who's moving to Backdrop 1 knows what's in store for Backdrop 2, and deciding the kinds of things we want to break in major version changes is going to be important. I really like our backwards compatibility policy for PHP, but there are a bunch of things like this that might be something where you could say, this is what you can expect, what could be an issue in moving to Backdrop 2, like maybe your jQuery, custom jQuery stuff will need to be updated. Or maybe your HTML markup is going to be different and your CSS identifiers aren't going to match and you're going to have to update your theme. Just kind of setting some ground rules about even though we say we're API compatible, we have major version changes and stuff is going to shift, just so that we're upfront about that kind of stuff.
An important thing is that certain organizations, government organizations, are locked on certain versions of Windows with IE8, and I know there's a small portion of the internet that uses IE8, but that portion includes government agencies, unfortunately, and they can't, and they cannot do anything about it. It's a natural.
Is there an issue with jQuery 3 and IE8?
And 2.x as well.
they
dropped support.
Right.
They dropped support.
Is there a polyfill or another library or something that?
I don't think so. It could be, but I don't think so.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's an interesting recollection is that even though governments are stuck on some environments are stuck using Windows 7 and IE8 or whatnot.
I think it's Windows XP, by the way, not 7.
It's become pretty conventional for people that are in that situation to just use 2 web browsers. They just use the one web browser for their internal enterprise stuff that only works on IE, and then they use Chrome for using the entire rest of the internet because the rest of the internet doesn't work on IE8 anymore. You can't use Google Docs or Hangouts or anything.
They don't use that because it's they have classified information, and they don't use Google Docs. I know that for sure, at least in Australia. And also their IT departments, because they're using domains, they lock installation of any other browsers. They might unlock it for their certain.
It is an interesting problem space because we are not going to be their problem. The internet is going to be their problem. But at the same time, we do need to think about is this our market, right? What if they're doing intranets on Drupal 7 and they want to move those intranets to Backdrop? Is this going to hurt us if we deliberately?
I don't think so.
It's not just
really
if
don't
it's going to hurt us.
about
It's,
it anymore.
yeah, and I don't think it's a matter of if it's going to hurt us, but if we, our community is small, like we don't have hands and we have many things to do. Do we want to support IAEA? That's the question. It's like point.
I feel like if there is a significant portion of the Backdrop community that is stuck on these computers, they'll probably come up with like a jQuery downgrade module or something
Yeah.
that would do the things that we did with the jQuery update module in order to solve that problem. Like this is something that can be solved in Contrib. I don't think it will be. I don't want to worry about it.
Yeah, and as I said, I think last time I checked it, the IE8 usage was globally was 0.0.1 something percent. It's like
Not 80%.
Yes, not at all. And it's stated on our one of our principles. So we're good. Okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
That's enough about that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about other things that got fixed recently. So 112.6 came out. Also, 111.9 came out as well per our security policy of supporting the current version and the previous one. But 112.6 also included a set of other bug fixes that we've been rolling through, including a lot of them that we mention on these weekly calls. That includes the problem with options element, where if options element was previously installed and you upgrade to 112, it previously would throw a fatal error because form options from text, the same function was declared in two places. That was fixed in 3485 very elegantly, I might add, by using this handy function that we have called backdrop merged modules that prevents contrib modules from loading their updates when they're replaced by one in core. Layout clone breaks both layouts. It turns out it only breaks both layouts if it's a custom menu entry. 2673. That issue had a patch for a long time, but was lacking tests. We got tests written, and that is now merged and fixed. Contextual links for views. Sometimes the contextual link for a view would end up like way underneath the admin menu. The contextual link for a view has been moved down into the wrapper of the view rather than being on the entire page. And so that one has been merged and is in 112.6 as well. And lastly, sometimes core self-updates might fail because when it pulls down the archive, it reads all of the info files to make sure that a type is specified. And sometimes it would crash when it encountered a profile that didn't include a type in its .info file. So we just added type equals profile to all of the info files for profiles. That's 3553. So that's great. That's 4 of our issues that we've been bringing up for over a month. And all 4 of those have been fixed and are in 112.6. 112.7 is now the next bug fix release. And some issues that we still have lingering there includes an RTL issue with CK editor icons, issue 3504. Currently is in needs review. I think that we're getting really close there to get that one wrapped up. Supporting multiple equivalent security releases, issue 3524. With the 111.9 that just came out, this is again like an issue that if you're on the latest version of 111.9, it will still say there are security updates that must be applied to your site, even though your site is fully secure. So 3524 aims to solve that problem. There's no code backing this one yet, so still kind of stuck. Let's see. I haven't looked at this one. Translation PO file fix 36.4.
I think it's been RTBC'd. It's the one that we needed to adjust the regular expression that picked up which files, the file names of the .po files that we added so that it can be included in the dropdown when you install Backdrop.
Oh.
Yeah, and Olaf filed the pull request. So this has been RTBC'd by Herb.
Okay. Cool. Where it just starts allowing version
Yeah.
numbers as well.
At some point, I thought that we should allow any star.pl files, but yeah, that fixes things. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Great. Yeah, that'll help with the installer for people installing Backdrop in other languages. And also, speaking of the installer installing in other languages, there's the most embarrassing link because it's the very first link you see, almost the very first word you see when you install Backdrop is like install Backdrop in another language, and it links over to Drupal.org. That's embarrassing. So we've got 3560 that switches that link over to a new documentation page on backdropcms.org saying how to install Backdrop in another language, which is super awesome. So that'll be great. 112.7, those are the issues we've got called out. Although, as always, we have a large bucket of other issues that are underneath that same milestone that you can check out on GitHub. Looks like there's currently 43 of these kind of promoted issues.
Yep.
Let's see, how many did we get through for 112.6? Just out of curiosity. So we
I
got.
think there were at least 11.
Yeah, there's 21 fixed issues in 112.6. So that's great. 113. 113 is the next minor version of Backdrop. It'll be coming out May 15th, 2019. And feature freeze is less than 2 short weeks away. Feature freeze will be May 1st. So we've got some work to do. I think 113 is looking a little light as far as new functionality. I know that there's a couple of issues that have been merged into 113, but they're not really like headline-like features. Things that are coming along pretty well, though. Adding back field formatters a la from Drupal 6 is issue 1376. Currently, needs tests and needs review. I was like, what's NT? Yeah, needs test and needs review, but is looking pretty strong. Dashboard issue 495 is probably going to be our headline feature for 113. Looks like. Is this right?
So the status of the So the status of the module is really good. Like, it can go in. There's just a few minor issues with the UI, just some labels, some things that do not work as expected, but it's in good shape in general. And the decision was that with regards to features that were requested with new blocks that can be added, these can be done iteratively in future versions. Even I mean, they might not even be considered features and might be done in bug fix releases if it's fixes.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
The most annoying thing that I came across was that we are actually, there's a function that provides the listing for the available updates thing, and there's a block that provides all the available updates. But we are sort of like polluting that function by adding some classes into the arrays that it generates or it produces. And then even though you have selected the setting to just do not check for disabled modules, and that applies in the available updates page, it doesn't respect that in the block because of that. So this could be one of the things that we might need to leave, unless I figure it out sooner than that, might leave it for a bug fix release. Other than that, it's just trivial things.
Great. Yeah, I haven't looked at it recently since icons were added, and it's started looking a lot nicer.
Yeah,
it's still a little bit of a fire hose, but I do think it's likely better than the really terrible pattern that we have of showing you user/1 when you log in, and it doesn't tell you anything except for how long you've been a member. It's like the worst login behavior.
Yeah, this issue has been one of the oldest issues that we have. And then I mentioned in the previous meeting that I was watching a presentation for the Lightning distribution, and they also include a dashboard. I didn't have the chance to actually check what that is, but our advantage is that we are using layouts and we allow people to just add blocks there and do it. like utilize it, I guess more intuitively.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's looking good.
So 495 is in good shape. In that case, like 2 weeks before committing is plenty of time. And we do, really strive to commit stuff when it's like, to a point that we know that we're not going to have major changes, but it might not be perfect yet, and then iterate on it. And that will definitely be the case for this module, that we'll probably be seeing lots of minor changes to it, in perpetuity, like the rest of core.
Yeah, yes, you do. One of the most sort of like, I guess, obvious features that we want from WordPress as well is to communicate changes to people. Like this dashboard is going to be used by administrators, so we might want to communicate, and we have automatic updates coming on. So we might want to say, hey, your site has been updated. This is what the major things that have changed. So it's a good, or news from curated news from our Backdrop world.
Yeah, curated news might be like, we might be thinking that it's kind of difficult, but we could totally like iframe that in, and it would be like a one-liner. It's like latest news from Backdrop. It's just an iframe to our website, and then it would be absolutely like maintenance free as far as like code. It would just kind of work forever. I don't know, kind of interesting. Of course, it would, the fonts not lining up can really just be like nails on a chalkboard to a lot of people, though. So,
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Other issues. Adding translatable strings to core config files, issue 3455, still needs review. It's been this way for months, unfortunately. That gets us rolling on starting to make it so that config files start exposing their translatable strings so that they can be picked up by the POTX module. That would make it so that the translation files that you download from the localized website are more comprehensive, because they'll include stuff in config files. So status of that needs review on the first set of config files that get these translated strings. Package signing in the category of automatic updates is issued 1992. John Franklin posted a whole series of updates about a month ago, and I've slowly been working through reviewing all of the work that he's been doing. I've got caught up in working on project module. John's work has been really comprehensive. Like, he hasn't just written contrib modules or add-on modules that can be added to core. He's also been working on project module to deal with the providing portion of, or the signing portion of the operation. And it's looking really great. I appreciate that he's working within, in many cases, this might not be a good thing, but he's working within the monolithic model of Backdrop. That backdropcms.org is currently where the packaging happens. And the approach that he's taking is make it so that backdropcms.org would gain a new module that would give it the capability to sign things that are created by project module. And he's building out new APIs into project module so that the packager right now is just exists within a chunk of custom code on backdropcms.org. And because now there's going to be other things interacting with the packaging process, including adding signatures, he's building out the capability for these things to interact with each other. So it's all looking really great. So there's been some activity in project module. I think we're going to start. I think I have already merged one thing, but we'll be seeing more things in the near future. It's pretty unlikely that update module will actually start, or that we'll get all of this in for 1.13, but it is totally possible that we could at least make backdropcms.org start signing packages and including the signature information in the feeds in the near future. So we'll have the feed set up with signatures, but core probably won't be capable of actually validating them for a little while yet.
One other thing that needs to be like more props given to John is that he provided extensive and detailed documentation on how to test things, and it's like even a person that doesn't know anything about these things can just test it easily.
Yeah,
Amazing.
And I mean, just the amount of incredibleness on this is pretty overwhelming. He also wrote 2 alternative ways of signing stuff with SSL or with GPG, and we basically get to now choose, well, which one do we want? And it really depends on which one is the most widely available or most compatible, I think. It also really, like the implementation that I'd started that used Sodium was very direct and very non-pluggable. It gives us the opportunity, if we want to use Sodium, we could do that too. We could literally just provide multiple signatures and different things, and then whichever library you had, it could use that to validate the signature.
He made it pluggable. I think it could provide
for that. I mean, why is that pluggable? That just seems like unnecessary abstraction to me.
Well, it's pluggable because we don't know what the best choice is.
Right. But like, if we made a decision, wouldn't we want to remove that abstraction?
Well, the best decision right now probably won't be the best decision 2 years from now.
Okay.
Because GPG is probably the right decision now. And that's one John is leaning towards, because it's the most universal. It's like what all Linux distributions use to validate all of their packages, for example. However, GPG will probably never be a part of PHP Core, which Sodium already is in PHP 7.2.
Mm-hmm. I think having it be pluggable allowed it to test it easily, because it also allowed to do MD5, which is, you don't need to have anything on your server to do MD5. It's excellent.
So is this the kind of thing where like it would depend on which server it's running on as to what option it might try?
I think so. We haven't gotten to that question yet, but I think what we'll probably start with is we'll use GPG if it's available and MD5 if it's not.
Okay.
And then put something on the status.
GPG made available? Is that like when you build your server, you have to specifically install a
set of PHP? Yeah. It's like it's an extension in the same way that when you install PHP, you have to say like
right.
mcrypt or mbstring.
Oh, okay.
Or
it's part of it's also part of PHP. It's just not part of PHP Core. It's just a add-on. Okay.
Yep. So it's widely available and not any more difficult to install than any of the other extensions that Backdrop Core requires, including PDO and mcrypt and stuff like that. But
most people running Backdrop aren't going to be setting up their servers, so that's why you're thinking PGP, right? Because everything else is already using it, so the likelihood of it being there on a shared server is fairly high.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, that's something that we need to evaluate is do a run through shared hosts and see what is typical, and see. I'm sure that. Well, actually, just because it's also strange, just because they have OpenSSL, which every server will have because you have it for HTTPS, doesn't mean that they have the PHP extension that works with OpenSSL. And so I think GPG is going to be our most likely, it's going to be widely available solution.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, the question there is actually still open. It's like maybe Sodium is the right thing, but it's hard to really say.
Well, so you've definitely defined the use case for having it be pluggable. And I think that also leaves us time to say like, okay, well, today this is our solution, this is what we'll use today. And then we'll keep an eye on Sodium. And if it becomes, that most servers now offer PHP 7.2 and therefore have Sodium, or are planning on moving to PHP 7.2 and have added Sodium and PHP 7.1 or 7.0, whatever else they're running, that could become, the go-to choice in the future. And then we would have the ability to make that change at whatever point that's necessary.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't have
We
it doesn't
have the right decision now. We just have to have a decision. Then we can change it.
and maybe if it's pluggable, we can support all things. Well, not all
Right.
things,
So someone
but
could have a contrib module that's like always use sodium or something, right?
Yeah.
And then switch it that way if that's what they wanted.
you can fall back to whatever is available for your server.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how we'll manage this in core. John's modules right now, there's a module called CodeSign, and it looks like CodeSign, he has filed a pull request against core. I haven't gotten to the point of evaluation that that I've looked at that segment yet, but I have to wonder, like, if that's part of core, like, should that just be like a hidden module, because it's like really like highly technical what that service would actually be providing, you know?
Yeah, it should just be, I think, like, so it could be a hidden module. It could be required by installer module or something, so that if you're trying to do automatic updates or manual UI updates or whatever, it's in there and it does the background job. But if you're not doing those things, you don't have to have it on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have yet to figure that portion out, or if it even needs to be, you know, separate from installer module at all. You know, I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, it could be like a sub
We
module or
can
something.
continue discussing that, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff to look at there, and we are moving forward, especially on the backdropcms.org side of things. Which is
That's
great.
really exciting.
And lastly, telemetry module. Speaking of things that require backdropcms.org integration, issue 285, the idea being that we start collecting more information from installations of Backdrop via an opt-in process to like tell us your PHP version and MySQL version and what modules you're running. More granular information than we currently get from project module. We haven't seen really any activity on this. So I've got a question on the agenda, like, you know, maybe we should be serious about this and just say, like, we should punt on this from 113 and take it out from our agenda for the remainder of the release.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Also, Doc Wilmot has been asking some nice hard questions in the queue. I think I might have a misunderstanding of how like the current project module works in terms of like sending data. Doc Wilmot thinks that it just like pulls a feed and we just count how many times that feed is pulled, which means we don't have any mechanism in core now for sending data to backdropcms.org. So we would need to think up an entirely new process for how that would work, not only on the backdropcms.org side of how to receive it, but like what that would look like as part of Backdrop. And that, if that's the case, which I just spent some time looking through update module, and it does, I haven't actually found any URLs yet, but there are a lot of functions that make it look like it's doing that. I haven't gotten to the bottom of them yet. Then this is way too much work to do in the amount of time we have remaining for this release.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, let's push it.
Okay.
Eventually, this is going to become our oldest open issue. It's 285. You know.
Every now and then, I go through the queue and sort it by oldest to newest and see what's in there. just to see what these low numbers are. What are these 3-digit ones?
Yeah, I usually like. Yeah, I usually like to grab the low sort of like numbers as well. Reverse sorting the queue. It's interesting. Yeah, but there's quite a few of them that we have pushed to 2.x. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, that's it for 113. Do you guys have any things you guys would like to discuss after those topics?
Oh, two things. One thing we started talking about before you got here, Nate, was that there seems to be some chatter in the Backdrop world about separating security fixes from other bug fix releases. And I know this is something they've started to do in Drupal as well, where there will be one release that's only the security fix, and there'll be another one that contains a bunch of other stuff. I personally don't like the separation of them because I feel like it makes more work for me as the maintainer of a million Drupal 7 sites that I have to do like one update one week and then I have to do another update the next week. And it's frustrating that I have twice the work when I could have just had one update with all of them. And so it would be interesting to think about like what problem this solution is trying to solve and sort of reimagine the problem space. So I'm not sure we necessarily have time to get into a big discussion about this today, but Gregory and I did throw some ideas around about like, rather than having more releases that people have to update more often, if we had like a test it safe rollback option so that if it did break everything, you would have like an unupdate.php that would be able to like reverse the things that happened in update.php. So that if you like applied an update, didn't realize it broke something, got a whole bunch of new content, later realized something that was broken, you could downdate instead. That might be one way to do it, rather than expecting that all the people that are going to run Backdrop are going to have developers who can run like, oh, let's just only run the security version and maintain our patches for a little longer. I think is maybe not the right use case for our audience. So some big thinking that needs to happen there. I think we should leave this on the agenda for next week, and maybe if we get some more people, we can chat about it again.
Yeah, I'm just going to dive right in. Sorry. I want to put an argument against making security only releases as well. Like, for example, the 1.12.6 that just came out. I have a pretty strong habit of only updating my sites for security fixes, because that's all that I really care about. Like,
a lot of work.
What's that?
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work updating your site, exactly. And so a lot of times what I'll end up doing is, let's say I'm not sure that these versions are actually correct, but 1.12.5 came out, and let's say 1.12.5 had a bunch of bug fixes in it, but 1.12.6 came out, and imagine it was a security only fix. But my site is still running 1.12.4 because that was a security fix. So I have to go through a bug fix release that includes non-security fixes in order to get the security fix. And that happens to me pretty much every time I update. That it's like, you already have to be on the latest bug fix release in order to get a security only fix. We're not going to make a security only fix for every bug fix version that there is. So the likelihood of you having a site that only gets a security fix and doesn't have anything else whatsoever, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting too much, because maybe some people are more keen on doing things like all the time. But even when we add automatic updates, we talked about some kind of like security only fixes, but there won't be really the option. I think we actually talked about how security only fixes are almost impossible because of this problem. We can't just apply security fixes because we have to go through other bug fix versions. And so instead, in automatic updates, we talked about having it be automatic updates within the minor version or automatic updates within the major version. And then that's the level of granularity you have. There's no security only option. There's bug fixes only versus bug fixes and features, bug fix versions versus minor versions.
As for those sites that are not regularly updated with content, the smaller sites, I mean, the ones that have less traffic, we also have a follow-up for backing up things before we do the upgrade. So there will be a package there with a database, and people can revert. It's not going to be implemented as part of the auto updates, I guess. It's a follow-up issue, but still, it's there. Yeah. I think
that's also super interesting, because right now I think backup and migrate is our #1 contrib module. So that would sort of hit the like, what is it that is our most popular contrib that should be in core, and having a backup tool is obviously high on people's list.
Yeah, and it should be done transparently, just in case. Like if we keep a couple of backups, it should be more than enough. And it's not as if hosting plans now have an issue with how much space they offer, or if like our target audience is not big data companies, so they'll have small databases, I guess.
Okay. There's two other things on the list here. One of them is update hooks and variables in the 7.x version of contrib?
So there's this thing. So there was a security release for Stade's file proxy. We couldn't apply the security fix, and it didn't apply to the Backdrop version because it wasn't updated since 2016. We are trying to bring it up to date, but this came up and was that in the meantime, we only had one hook update for 1000, which is the hook that we use to grab the variables and then convert them to config and then delete the variables. In the meantime, there were two other settings or variables that have been added in the 7.x version. And then I know that the policy is that when you need to do something, you need to create a new update hook. But the way that it was done in that module, it was just setting a config setting, config set. But I think in that case, it excludes sites that have been migrating directly to this new version because it doesn't grab the variables from the other one. So we either need to make it a policy that if new variables have been added in the D7 version of the module, then we also need to, in the new hook, to do a variable update get, I think, and then a variable update del.
Yeah,
so that it grabs those.
Happens for lots of contrib projects where if we're trying to move together with Drupal 7, we have to count both the people who moved to this module at the very beginning of the module and the people who have been moving to it along the way. So our update hooks need to account for not only the people who did the initial migration and then are updating the Backdrop module, but people who are coming in anytime from 7. And so that makes the upgrades a little messy because the initial one, you have to say, hey, you need to have been at least on version X on Drupal 7. But then after that, you've already met that initial requirement. And so every update hook needs to check and see if the update needs to be run before it runs itself. So like it'll say, hey, like, does this variable exist in the database? If so, copy it over. Does this schema need to be changed in this table? If so, change it. So there, it makes our updates a little bit more complicated because it needs to account for both those use cases. And I think this is something that would be really good to have like a blog post on, because depending on what's going on in your module, the kinds of like checks you need to do can be super different. And so maybe Stage File Proxy would be a perfect example of one to start with. I know I've run into this a lot with some of the modules I've been trying to maintain, where I have like co-maintainers on Drupal 7 who will do things. And I'm like, oh, I need to pull those in. And then I'm like, oh, I need to handle my updates too. And it does get sloppy. So I think having some very explicit instructions on how to handle that would be really useful.
I think that documenting it as well, if we have a specific, so like in the upgrade thing, but the point is that because we're trying to get the security update for, which is not actually a security problem at the moment because it doesn't apply to the current version, but in order to move things with this specific module, is the correct solution to create a new hook and then add, for those two variables that were added, add a variable, grab the variable, and do the same thing that we've done for the original hook, right?
Yeah, but you'll have to check and see if the variable exists first. So like it could be that if you run this update hook on a Backdrop site, it does nothing. But if you run it on a site that's coming from Drupal 7, it'll pull in the additional variable. It'll do the original update, and then it'll also do this new update.
Yes.
It's the sort of thinking that is the way that a lot of JavaScript development happens, that instead of doing browser checking, like are you running IE or are you running Firefox, which is unreliable, instead you do feature detection and say, if this thing exists in the first place, then deal with it, or then enhance this feature, then make it available. I think that's the safest way to approach things. Instead of assuming a particular state, check if the state is there, use update variable get to pull in the variable, and if it exists, then migrate its setting into the Backdrop equivalent and then delete the update variable.
If it doesn't exist, set it to the default value.
Okay, yeah, okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I know what to do now.
Yeah, that will make the most robust updates, even if it's slightly chaotic, because you'll need to be doing adding more and more functions that just keep checking for different things.
It's not going to happen all the time, though. It happens only when the D7 module is actively maintained to add new features which require new variables.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be many cases of that, but still we need to account for it.
Yeah, Jen also put in here, there's a special hook update last removed. That as an alternative, I would say perhaps less robust way, your module could also decide that it only allows updating from the very latest version of the 777 equivalent. And that forces the module, when you run the update, it has to be running the latest version of the 777 module.
Oh yeah, it tells you please update the module first, and then yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it looks for an update hook from 777 under the 7000 number that says that it has to have at least that version before it will run any updates. And Backdrop is, it's a little, again, it's a little bit weird that we have to deal with the versioning thing, but Backdrop will run 7,000 updates. It'll consider them before 1,000 updates. So when you say hook update last removed and you say 7,010, it considers 7,010 to be before update 1,000.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
And I use that usually for the first time I do an update from Drupal to Backdrop, just so that you can kind of indicate this is the place at which the Drupal module was forked.
Ordered.
And then from then on, I have to put those like state checks in all of my update hooks. But every time there's a Drupal update hook, I add a Backdrop update hook. I just check the state before I run the update, whereas in Drupal that you can just run it because they can assume people are on a particular schema.
When you say check the states, what do you mean by states? The state.
It depends on what it is. Like, is the variable in the database?
Okay.
Or does this column exist in this database table? Whatever's getting changed, you check to see if it needs to be changed.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, thanks. And then the other point is you, Jen?
Yeah, so I just saw your thing about updates, and it triggered, I saw comments from Olaf about the issues he was having upgrading from Drupal 7. And there are a bunch of like similar modules in Drupal 7 contrib to what we're doing in Backdrop Core that I think it might be worth adding update hooks for. So things like menu block module, right? You don't need menu block module in Backdrop, but if you had menu block module in Drupal 7 and you uninstall it, you're going to lose all the configurations on your blocks. And when you move into Backdrop, you're going to have to reconfigure those blocks. We could provide an upgrade path for menu block that would define the same settings on a core block for Backdrop. So I just had a note here about like, I would like to invest time in doing these kind of updates, but wanted to get kind of like consensus as to whether we should. And I'll go ahead and create an issue for each one. We'll be like, here's a partial upgrade from menu block, and these are the things we're upgrading, and these are the things we're not, because we don't have all the features that were in menu block. And that way people can refer to those in the future and see what kinds of things are going to handle.
This brings the question that, Jen, you've done more upgrades from D7. Do you uninstall the contrib modules?
It depends on the module.
Okay. Not an easy answer.
Yeah, this is a good question too. It really depends on if I need that data in Backdrop or not, right? Because if you uninstall a module, it's going to delete all your variables. It's going to throw out your database table. And if you need that data, you don't want to uninstall that module first. So in those cases, I also want to write an update hook that will say like, hey, you have X module installed in Drupal 7. Let's turn it off for you. And because we're repurposing the menu block data for core blocks, we'll turn off the menu block module in your system table. So you don't have to delete it and you don't lose the data. But then I think we also need to have in that list of like modules moved into core or whatever, we need to have like, this one provides an upgrade path, this one does not. So that if you uninstall a module, you know you're going to lose the data, or you're going to have to move the data around yourself.
Okay.
So I think this is the kind of thing where we need to specifically state to people who are upgrading, uninstall menu block. Don't uninstall menu block, like one or the other, so that they know. And this is also going to happen, like every site that gets upgraded is going to have more of these questions because they're going to be using different modules. And it'll be good to, anything that we've put similar functionality in core, make sure that we either have an upgrade path or state that like you're going to have to reconfigure it.
Yep.
One way or the other.
A really good example of this is when Path Auto was merged into core. Because Path Auto was an independent module and it got merged into Path module in Backdrop. And we have two updates, Path Update 1000 and Path Update 1001. It's a little unfair because Path Auto was wholesale moved into core, including all of its settings verbatim, which made things really straightforward. but path update 1000 deals with setting a bunch of defaults, and then it updates Drupal 7 variables into the Backdrop core module. But then update 1001 deals with people that had installed Path Auto for Backdrop. And so, because we had to upgrade both from Drupal 7 and from previous versions of Backdrop that were running Path Auto. And so it's got both examples, one pulling from the variables table for Drupal 7, and then one pulling from the Path Auto config file for Backdrop. So that's a really great example of like a way that we can do that. And when it gets done, in both cases, it's, hang on, does it? It deletes the variables once they're moved over.
Yep.
In the Backdrop case, it deletes it from the system table. Oh, it does that. Oh, I see. It does that either way. So because we wrote these at the same time, 1000 will execute and then 1001 will execute. At the end of 1001, it deletes from the system table the Path Auto entry line. So effectively, it uninstalls it.
Yep.
So in the case of Path Auto, everything gets moved over and then all of the cruft gets cleaned up after you as though it were never there. So that's the ideal use case.
Yes, and it depends on the use case, whether the module that you're in question has been migrated to Contrib for Backdrop, or we made the feature kind of directly into core without porting the module in our Contrib first. So it is per use case, but yeah. And also see how that function served us well. The what, I forgot the name of the function now with the options. What was it? Merged. What was it called?
Backdrop merged modules.
Yes. So that function works, but only if the module that has been merged into core does not have the same name as the module in Contrib.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And for in the use case of Path Auto, we merged everything into Path, so we didn't have the same name or conflict namespace, if you like. Yeah. So,
but
anyway.
for something like redirect, it doesn't work because redirect was wholesale moved into core.
Yep. Exactly. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up. We're like way over time now.
Yeah.
And Jen has left us. So I'll just go ahead and say thank you, everybody out there, for watching. Gregory, thanks for coming to the meeting as always. And yeah, we'll catch you guys online and next week. So
yep.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye.
Can you actually